Welcome, everyone, to our monthly presentation, Circle of Life Coalition, that we do the first Thursday of every month at various times. Noontime, obviously, is now. We will be doing Facebook Live from this presentation forward, and we are Facebook Live. We have turned off your cameras. The presenter today has indicated that she likes to be interactive. So if there are questions or a way you'd want to respond, please raise your hand so that we don't have a lot of people talking at once. Again, welcome, Circle of Life Coalition presentation. The vision of the Circle of Life Coalition is an informed community open to honest conversations about life and death, one in which we inspire each other to live life fully while acknowledging the inevitability of death, and where choices for end-of-life care are effectively communicated, documented, respected, and honored. If you'd like to be a part of the Circle of Life Coalition, you can just go to our website and subscribe, and certainly in comments indicate your interest, or if you have a topic you would like us to present, we're always open to those ideas, or if you know of any speakers. That also is very, very much supported, and we will do the work to get them on the screen to see you. If you'd like to make a donation, you can also go to the circleoflifecoalition.org, our website again, and hit the donate button in order to support our fine endeavors here. So I'm going to introduce our speaker today. If I can get my darn mouse to work here. Always love those technical challenges. Here we go. Today we have Laura Adamo, who is a licensed funeral director, priding herself on supporting families looking for non-traditional arrangements made more accessible with the support of a licensed funeral director. An advocate of family-centered end-of-life planning, home funerals, and green burial, Laura moved to Berks County in 2022 to join the Kuhn Funeral Home family, a firm with Green Burial Council certification and a reputation for the highest level of service. You actually, Laura, had a teaching degree in the state of New York, with a BA in creative writing and Latin from the City University of New York and a master's in teaching from the New School. Returning to school in 2017 and graduating with honors from Northampton Community College's Funeral Service Education Program in 2019. Mm-hmm. You are a mother of two, a Buddhist, and a practitioner of yoga. Great way to meditate. Welcome so much to our coalition presentation.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about one of my most passionate preoccupations, which is the greening of end of life. I originally proposed that we would do, or I was asked to do, a presentation on green burial. And is my screen showing to the rest of you? I titled this An Introduction to Green Funerals.
Yes.
Reason being that, green burial is just one of the disposition methods that falls under the green funeral sort of movement, right? Now, to say a little bit about how I end up being a funeral director, I was a teacher for years and worked in the education field. And was also a volunteer with hospice in my spare time. And my, I guess you could say, preoccupation with end of life started long ago, but it wasn't until I was in my second career move that I felt a pull to be involved in the funeral industry and in funeral service. I wouldn't say the funeral industry per se, but that's after some time, taking some time to investigate how to be involved in end of life beyond the hospice pronouncement. I realized I needed to become a licensed funeral director in order to do the things I wanted to do, which was advocate, like I said, like you said in my introduction, Deborah, advocate for families that were looking to do things differently than we have come to do them in the last 100 years or so. Now, I would like to know who's here, and the reason I asked for an interactive sort of conversation is that I find when I attend green funeral or green burial adjacent events, everyone there already knows a lot because or has done some research or just feels very passionately about the environment or about end of life and greening end of life, and we all end up talking to each other. It's like, preaching to the choir, I would say. And I wanted to know if there are people here who are who this is the first time seeing something about green burial. This is their, putting a toe in the water about what it means. They've been hearing a buzzword go around, maybe they saw something in the news or heard something in talking with people and just don't know anything at all, or, or just, it's all about just finding something out. Is there anyone here who does not have a basic understanding?
Hi, my name's Stacy. I'm a social worker with Green Hospice. And I don't have much experience or knowledge about green burials, but I'm here to kind of get information to provide to my families.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for being here. And I do also want to acknowledge that I recognize that there may be people here who have even way more experience than I do, because they've been doing this work for years and years. I just became a funeral director in 2018, so I'm a newbie. I've been working here with Kuhn Funeral Homes for just over a year, but I was a funeral director in another county in Pennsylvania where traditional funerals were the lion's share of our work, and the funeral home was not very interested in or very accepting of alternatives. I transitioned here for the very reason that I saw opportunity for exploring more and being more, open, bringing families in instead of, having them feel that the funeral homes, the local funeral homes would not have space for or acceptance for green alternatives. Deborah, you had a question?
Yes, I've just wanted to make sure you could see the hand raised. So great if anybody wants to make a comment, ask a question. But I really don't know a lot about green funerals in our area at all. I've always gone the traditional route, so I definitely would some more information. And it looks like the comments are not new to the concept, but I have no direct experience and I'm interested in learning more about this topic. Don't have much experience. So you got pretty much newbies here in the audience.
Super. So I think I'm prepared to kind of walk us through what is local. I'm getting an internet connection unstable message. Can you hear me okay? Can you raise a hand? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
All right.
fine.
Good. All right. So I'm going to just jump right in with some information to let you know where we are at. Here we go. You're not alone in being interested. Those of you who are sort of like, I just want to know more about this. A funeral industry publisher by the name of Kate Boylston did some recent research and found that the great majority of folks that they surveyed were interested, very interested, or extremely, that I'm sorry, not interested, but that they had a commitment to environmentally friendly funeral choices, that it was extremely important to them or very important to them. It's the National Funeral Directors Association, which is a funeral industry, they are not green by nature. That's not their focus. They did a survey just last year and found that 60% of the consumers that they surveyed had heard the word and wanted to know more about green funeral options. So two major funeral industry entities are recognizing that this is coming from, it's not a top down, this is coming from the consumers and working its way up. So you're not alone in wondering what's going on and wanting to know more. As I mentioned at the beginning, green burial is not the only green option. What constitutes green funeral services depends entirely on who you speak to. Cremation, let's talk just for a moment about how popular cremation is becoming. As a choice for final disposition, cremation is on the rise and is overtaking traditional funeral service. So the traditional American funeral, the way that, funeral homes are sort of built to provide services to families, we embalm bodies, we casket, we have some kind of ceremony, whether it's at a funeral home or at a church, and go to burial at a cemetery. That's what, to define traditional. Cremation is overtaking traditional funeral service, and we've seen that. And most funeral homes, if they want to survive, have pivoted and begun providing cremation, providing opportunities for families to have a viewing with a cremation, like trying to find ways to accommodate the change from a traditional burial to the choice that families are making for cremation. Why are they choosing cremation? Interestingly, a lot of families are choosing cremation. Money is definitely an object, but they're also choosing cremation because it appears to be environmentally friendly. And that's an interesting, that they're not taking up land. Like, families will tell you that. I just don't want to be taking up space. And this doesn't, this cremation is simpler. It's back to, ashes to ashes. There are other reasons, though. We are not as religious as a society as we used to be. So, the Catholic Church took a stand against cremation at one point, and have since come to accept cremation as it's an acceptable form of disposition. So cremation became an opportunity for even folks who are practicing Catholics. So that was, part of the reason why cremation has grown as an option. Also, just the fact that cremation, the cremated remains are portable, and a lot of families want that portability, for lack of a better word. They may not be living in the place where they intend to spend the rest of their lives. They may not feel a familial connection to the area they're living in. They may not want to be tied to a place by the burial of their loved ones there. So that brings us to the next piece of interesting information about cremation, which will tie into when we talk about greening funerals. In terms of cremated remains, what are people doing with them? Because by law in Pennsylvania, cremation is a final disposition, meaning once the person is cremated, the state doesn't really, the state considers them disposed of. However, obviously, we have cremated remains. Now, the numbers are changing, but generally, about 30% of those cremated remains will be interred, meaning they'll be brought to a cemetery and interred just like a casket would be. And this is in fact required if you are of the Catholic faith. You can choose cremation, but after the cremation, the interment of the ashes is highly important. So they will inter the ashes, they will inter the cremated remains, and that's about 30% of the cremation families will go that route. Another 40% will take the cremated remains of their loved one home and keep them perhaps on display, like on the mantelpiece or in a closet. You know, once a family leaves our premises with their loved one's cremated remains, we don't generally as funeral professionals, concern ourselves with what they're doing with the cremated remains. About 20% of families will report that they have scattered the remains, that those remains were scattered, whether that was on land or at sea. And then the remaining percentage, about 10%, will actually place the cremated remains in a columbarium, which is like the cremation equivalent of a mausoleum. So what are people doing with these cremated remains? There you have it. It's they're either going into the ground or going into a columbarium, which is very traditional, involves a cemetery. But another half of families are doing something else. Now, this leads to the conversation about what is the greenest thing to do. Say you've chosen cremation, what can you do with cremated remains? And there has grown up some products and some companies that do some interesting things that are what I would consider environmentally friendly. Now, I will jump into those products and those companies in a moment, but I will say, this is where I'm going to insert that cremation is not necessarily the greenest. It's probably the least green of the green funeral services. It's a step away from the traditional burial, embalming, burial. However, a lot of environmentalists would take issue with the fact that cremation uses a tremendous amount of fossil fuel to be accomplished, and that it, especially if the cremated remains are then just being interred as a casket would be, that there's just as much land use, there's a carbon footprint associated with it, and it's not particularly environmentally friendly. It's just less environmental. It has less environmental impact than, say, embalming and a full casket burial. So people do take issue with the idea that cremation is green. However, just my little disclosure, probably should have made it at the beginning. I'm not here to judge anyone's choices about funeral service and what they want for their loved ones and what their final disposition choices are. That's why I'm able to work as a funeral director in a funeral home where we offer as many options as we can. We don't discourage families from choosing green burial options. We don't discourage them from choosing cremation. We don't discourage them from choosing traditional, because that's not our place. Going green is really a spectrum. And I like to use the analogy that just like, there are people for whom being environmentally conscious means recycling their plastics and not throwing trash out of their car window. And there are other people for whom being environmentally conscious means living completely off the grid and making their own clothes. It really is. It's about choice, and it's about living with your values and what makes sense to you. And my my personal professional goal is to make sure that families are supported in living out their values and doing what either they're planning their own final wishes or carrying out the final wishes of their loved one, that they're doing it in a meaningful way. So just a little disclosure there. Before I go on to the other types of funeral service, are there any pressing questions? Are there any pressing thoughts that anyone wants to share before I move on? I'm open. Okay. Alkaline hydrolysis is something you may have heard of by another name. It is also frequently called water cremation or flameless cremation or aquamation. Alkaline hydrolysis is another process of reducing the remains to bone, and then processing the bone. It is returned to families in much the same way that cremated remains are. However, alkaline hydrolysis is it has a much lower carbon footprint. The process involves it involves these large chambers into which alkali and water are introduced. That mixture, the body is placed in the chamber. The mixture is heated and there is pressure applied. Rather than flame, which creates, smoke and burns off the body, the alkaline hydrolysis process reduces the human form down to a non-toxic, watery, a liquid, which is then drained off. It leaves the skeletal, structure, which is then broken down. It's softened so that it's broken down, and then alkaline hydrolysis is less environmentally impactful than cremation. That's why it became a thing. It offered another process which would return the same kind of remains, but would have, like I said, a lower carbon footprint. But that alkaline hydrolysis, couple problems with it. It's not legal in Pennsylvania. It's not legal in most states. It's now legal, or I should say that the law does not prohibit it in about 20 states. At the time of my research, there were only 9 states in the country that had alkaline hydrolysis facilities. And I think my thought is that alkaline hydrolysis for funeral homes, which, or some other kind of funeral regulated facility, would need to invest in this equipment. It's a high buy-in. It requires, it is highly regulated because it is a disposition process. It costs a lot of money to open a facility, and it's almost like I like to think of it as like the same way that Uber may not take off in certain places because people don't want to drive unless they're going to have lots of riders, and the riders can't get rides because there aren't people driving there. So they're the way that alkaline hydrolysis could take off is if there were a lot of facilities opening and people were going to it. But while people are not going to them, they won't open because it's not easy to open one. So it just hasn't taken off. It's certainly not local here in Pennsylvania. So, but just as an aside, because it is in one of the newer options, and it may become legal. There is legislation pending in a number of other states for alkaline hydrolysis and for other types of not cremation, disposition processes. And we'll get to the other big one that's coming up, natural organic reduction, after we talk about green burial. So finally, we can move on to another slide. So green burial is, there's a simple definition for it. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I kind of went off on a little tangent there before I go on. Regarding cremation, I mentioned that there are products and companies coming up, and I wanted to show you some of them. So you have cremated remains, or you have alkaline hydrolysis remains. What do you do with them? And that's a question. If you're not going to bring the cremated remains for burial, and you'd like to do something that is not, just placing them in your home, you can choose to scatter or disperse the cremated remains in a number of different ways. So, for instance, on this page, I'm showing a scattering tube. So these products on the left side are different kinds of what we call urns, but they're all for the purpose of scattering, ironically. So the scattering tube is made of paper. It's used, there is the cremated remains are loaded into the tube, and then the tube is used to gently introduce the cremated remains to whatever, whether it's ground or water, scattering without having to handle the remains, because they sort of like gently scatter out of the tube. The middle watery photo there is it's made of a paper mache material. I have to actually show you one. This is, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I have an example here of what is similar to what is in the water there. So this is our turtle urn. It's made by a company called Passages out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And they create these urns for cremated remains to be loaded in. And then something like this would be, the family could release the whole urn into a lake or the, or the ocean for the scattering of the cremated remains into the water without, handling them again. The other urn that you see there, which looks more like a typical urn with the footprints on it, that is made of sand and some sort of binder. And that urn, placed in water or in soil, will eventually just degrade. And the cremated remains placed inside of it, whether they're placed directly inside or in a biodegradable bag, would then disperse in the same way. We're going to see if we can play a bit of this video. Actually, let me look at the time, because I'm not gonna do this video because I feel like I'm talking quite a bit, and we may run out of time otherwise. But the video is from Eternal Reefs. I have more interesting videos coming up. But Eternal Reefs is a company, one of several, that families can take the cremated remains. They send the cremated remains to a company that then mixes the cremated remains in with materials that will then form a wreath ball that is then, it has a marker on it, kind of, a memorial marker of whose cremated remains are part of that wreath ball. And then that wreath ball is lowered into the ocean and becomes part of, a coral reef, and becomes sort of a protected area. And that, I'm sure that speaks to a lot of folks who are about conservation. If you have cremated remains already, and you would like your loved one to be part of this, watery coral reef, that's an option that you have to to do something special and unique. And those companies they've been around for a while, actually. Those are, I think, some of the first green funeral companies I heard of, actually. We'll go on. So jumping on to green burial now. Did I skip past one? Yeah. So green burial, this is from the Green Burial Council. And the Green Burial Council is a nonprofit organization that has two main goals. One is to educate and be a resource center for green burial, and the other is to certify. So similar to like the organic, the term organic got thrown around a lot until some organizations said, well, wait a second, now we have to talk about what do we mean when we say organic, and who's going to say, yes, this is organic. You can't just use this word willy-nilly. And the Green Burial Council is a certifying organization that puts their stamp on particular cemeteries, particular funeral home or funeral service providers, and particular manufacturers of green products. This is their definition of green burial. It's a way of caring for the dead with minimal environmental impact. It aids in the conservation of natural resources, reduction of carbon emissions, protection of worker health, and the restoration and or preservation of habitat. So that's a pretty high bar. And, good for them for putting that out there. And for holding people who say that they are doing green funeral service to a standard. I've listed the greenburialcouncil.org's website there because I urge anyone who's interested in green burial or green funeral service to go to their website. It is chock full of information and resources. It's a great organization to be a part of. Kuhn Funeral Home, who I and Samantha Smith work for, is green burial certified, and it's a process. It means that we are prepared to do green funeral service, that we offer green burial caskets, green cremation products, that we are committed to serving families that are looking for these kinds of funeral services. So particularly what this means, would take that quote down into the nuts and bolts. It means that the body is not embalmed with chemicals. Formaldehyde is the major carcinogenic element in most embalming fluid. We, as a funeral home, choose to mostly not use formaldehyde-based products. We actually use a glutaraldehyde-based product. Not to get too scientific, but the major concern with formaldehyde products is that they have been shown to cause cancer, and as a result, embalmers and other people who handle formaldehyde products like that, they're at a higher risk for blood cancers, they're at a higher risk for ALS. And just as workers, our exposure to those chemicals, is constant if you're continuously in a morgue. We have here at our funeral home the green embalming products that are certified by the Green Burial Council. They are all natural. Now, I have actually, because most families hear embalming and green as two separate things, have only been requested and have only performed one green embalming. But it was successful. It is not the typical result that I would expect with a traditional embalming, but it is an alternative that I hope will start to become more common among families who choose green burial. The other elements of man-made vaults are not used. If you're not aware, most cemeteries in the state of Pennsylvania require a vault. In addition to a casket, they require a vault. And the vault is a cemetery requirement because it assists the cemetery in keeping the land level and letting them, run mowers and heavy machinery across the cemetery as they need to, without worrying about, caskets or urns or anything else causing the collapse of buried caskets, causing the collapse of land. We want a nice level field, right? That's what most cemeteries look like, a big lawn. In green burial, those vaults are not used. Caskets or burial containers have to be biodegradable, and generally, traditional headstones are not permitted, they're not used. Now, this is, again, the gold standard for a green burial because the Green Burial Council says so. Are there other ways of doing greener burial? Absolutely. Excuse me. Turn my ringer off. I want to take a look at what green burial looks like around here. Oh, gosh. Locally, we have hybrid cemeteries. There are 2 of them right in Berks County. A hybrid cemetery is a good old-fashioned cemetery that offers green burial services either throughout the rest of the cemetery or in a designated area. If you are familiar with Gethsemane Cemetery in Laureldale, they opened a specific section for green burial. I think it was just about 2 years ago that this became their thing. They've set aside a part of the cemetery. It's called Saint Kateri Tekakwitha. It was named after the first Native American Catholic saint. It is it's kind of a wonder to behold, and I'm really grateful that they're there. I've done a number of burials there, and they're always they're beautiful. I have not been to Epler's Cemetery in Leesport yet. I will, probably be there this spring to check it out. It is, again, a hybrid cemetery, a traditional cemetery, headstones and all sorts of, the markings of traditional cemeteries on one side. They've set aside a portion for green burial. Now, when I say set aside, too, again, green, greener, greenest. Most cemeteries are, or at least I should say, in my experience, Gethsemane Cemetery in particular is willing to do work with families that say don't want, we don't want embalming. That's fine. They will bury an unembalmed body, or we want a wooden casket that's not mass produced. We're gonna use a pine box. They're fine with that. In their traditional cemetery area, there's a little anecdote about a local family that the rest of the family had been buried in the traditional area of Gethsemane Cemetery, and one younger person who had passed among that family had wished for a greener disposition, and but still wanted to be with the other family members who were in the traditional area of the cemetery. It's all about compromise, right? So Gethsemane Cemetery allowed them to have the body buried there, have the body buried without embalming. I believe they used a biodegradable casket. However, because this was in the traditional area of the cemetery, they did need to require a vault. So the the vault was, they call it butter dishing. It wasn't a vault, it was a grave liner, and the grave liner was inverted. So the body went directly into the ground in the casket or shroud was, introduced to the soil, and then the grave liner was placed over it, so that or the vault rather was placed over it, so that the cemetery's requirements for a vault would be adhered to, but the family's wishes for a greener burial would be met to the degree that it could be. Outside of that traditional area, though, that new section is entirely green. This is a photo of a burial in the green burial area, which I was a part of. So what you see there is a pine casket. The family chose casket. They were not excited about the idea of something that looked more like a basket. The family had placed a very large array of flowers on top. And you'll notice too, if you've been to any burials, the lowering device is not there. The green burial area, they eschew any kind of mechanical stuff. So what they will do is, once the family has departed the cemetery, the gravediggers will come and lower the casket into the grave with straps and then backfill the grave. So caskets, when they are green burial caskets, have to be completely wood construction. And the other alternative is a shroud. I have an example of a shroud here. I have done shrouding with a family here at Kuhn, and have brought the shrouded body to Gethsemane's cemetery for burial. It's a very moving process, mostly because, as you can see here, the body is clearly a body. It's not hidden. It is absolutely a human form, and very visually striking, different from your family's experience with a casket. I will watch this video with you. I will let this play. This is the only other kind of burial ground that you'll find in Pennsylvania is a natural burial ground for green burial. Now, natural burial grounds are different from hybrids in that they do not have that traditional section. And Penn Forest Natural Burial Park, it's in Verona, PA, which is, I think, is out. I know is out by Pittsburgh. This is not local for us. And I believe it was definitely the first of its kind. I'm not sure if it's the only of its kind or if it's the only one that has already been certified by the Green Burial Council. But I'll just let this play and give you a taste of the difference between a hybrid cemetery that's allowing green burial and a place that is dedicated to being only green burial.
I said to my wife, somebody should start a green cemetery in Pittsburgh, and she said, well, what are you doing? so that's how I ended up starting it. It was without much more thought than that. A natural burial part means that we bury people the way they were buried 200 years ago, without any embalming. Everything goes in the ground is biodegradable. It's either a wood coffin or just a cloth shroud. We have 35 acres of land, and 2 acres is dedicated to burial, but the other is dedicated to people. So we always talk about life at Penn Forest, not death at Penn Forest. We have a master plan that goes out about 150 years. Right now we have 1,400 graves laid out, but if the park grows, we can get to 15,000 graves. We have 10 acres that are set aside as a wildlife refuge, and that'll always stay that way, so that we'll always be here. That's the idea, long after I'm gone. We have Catholics, we have Greek Orthodox, we've had evangelical Protestants, we've had no religion, we've had Buddhists, we've had Seventh-day Adventists buried here. We haven't had it all, so there is no religious thing about it. I guess the common denominator is they're interested in the environment. When I think about social justice and environmentally friendly burial, the environmentally friendly part is important to me. I don't like toxic chemicals in the ground.
We're doing a number of different things. We're making a beautiful place for people to rest. We're making a more environmentally sound burial area by not using chemicals, and it's less costly for the people that are doing the burying. And all around, I think it's a win-win situation for everybody. It's much better, I think, than the ways that we have now for burial, where you're using horrible chemicals that are going to stay in the ground forever. And this just seems much more natural. It's very low impact on the earth and seems more natural.
We have walking trails. People can come and visit. They can walk their dogs. And we have a lot of projects around Penn Forest that train people in other areas of life. So we do gardening projects. We'll be making baskets with our willows this summer. We have a blacksmith training class that's going to train people how to do that work. And we'll have another number of other projects. We're going to have a greenhouse here that'll allow people to grow tea.
Whoops. I'm going to move on because I know we're also running low on time, and I see that there are more questions popping up. The other type of, so there are 3 types of green cemeteries. One is a hybrid, as I mentioned, Gethsemane and Epler's are. The other is the burial ground, which we have one of in Pennsylvania. And the third is a conservation burial ground. The difference, as I see it, between a natural burial ground and a conservation burial ground, natural burial grounds are cemeteries that are trying to be natural. Conservation burial grounds are usually land trusts that are working. So there are land trusts working with people who are doing burials. The focus is on the land, and the burial comes second. Whereas in natural burial grounds, they're privately owned, or they are, organizationally owned. They are focused on there being a cemetery and trying to keep it green, whereas conservation burial, it really is about the land first. There are very different ratios to, like, cemeteries, natural cemeteries, like the one we just saw in Verona, will have a very high, much higher kind of body count. They will be focused on creating a cemetery. Conservation burial grounds, what they do is they allow burial there to a certain extent, but the land is multi-use, and it is about making sure that that land, because it has burials there, is conserved and is not allowed to be developed and become something else. But the focus is really on the land, and the burial is kind of the secondary thing that they're doing there in order to conserve the whole of the land there. So that's my short. I'm not gonna do this video because that's my short explanation. This is not in Pennsylvania. The White Eagle Memorial Preserve is not in Pennsylvania. It was just the nicest sort of conservation burial ground example that I found, and if I had time, I would share. You're welcome to go back and take a look at them. But I'm going to move on because I want to go from green burial to the final disposition practice that I'm going to talk about today, which is natural organic reduction. And this I would like you to see. I really want to share this with you. It's a 2-minute video. I will say before I begin it, I prefer the term natural organic reduction, and that is the term that is shared by most people who are either legislating to get this disposition form passed or who are opening facilities. It is popularly known as human composting, or sometimes there is a company in one of the original companies in Washington is called Recompose, so they call it recomposting. Another company calls it terramation. If you've heard any of those terms, human composting, terramation, or natural organic reduction, they're all referring to the same thing, which is the placement of the body in a vessel with materials that will accelerate decomposition and turn the body into soil. Now, before I even launch this, I just want to say the only difference between green burial in the ground in one of those cemeteries that we just went over and natural organic reduction is that natural organic reduction is done in a vessel. It's not done in the ground, but it's the same thing that happens. It just happens faster and in a controlled environment. So in terms of the decomposition of the body and the final result, the natural organic reduction is faster, probably cleaner, but it's done in a facility, and the resulting soil that the human body becomes will be taken out of the vessel, and then something has to be done with it. I'm just going to say that quickly by way of introduction. I hope you'll enjoy this video.
Now, with in-depth reporting tonight on a topic we've been keeping an eye on. And this one comes from California, which as of now will allow a new eco-friendly burial method called human composting, starting in 2027. The bill was just signed into law by Governor Gavin Newsom over the weekend, and it is a process, human composting, where your deceased loved one is turned into healthy soil. Companies that offer this say every person who chooses this option over more traditional methods like burial or cremation will save 1 metric ton of carbon from entering the environment. It can cost around $5,000 to $7,000. That's a little less expensive than a casket funeral, but it's more expensive than cremation. California is not the first state to be doing this. Washington, Colorado, Oregon, and Vermont now allow human composting. NBC's Kristen Dahlgren has a closer look.
Trina Ballard's son lost her mother, Leanne, just 1 month ago.
She was modest and warm, thoughtful, practical.
One silver lining during this difficult time was their certainty around the funeral.
It was exactly who she was and what she would have been.
They decided on what's called terramation, also known as human composting. Instead of the traditional burial, the human body is composted and turned into soil, which is then given back to the family for future use.
There is something in us that wants to return to the earth.
Micah Truman is the founder of a Seattle-based funeral home called Return Home, one of a few places in the U.S. offering this option. The process involves organic material and oxygen. The bottom of a specially designed vessel is lined with sawdust, alfalfa, and straw. Then the body is placed inside, dressed with a compostable gown. The vessel is then filled to the top with more organic material and sealed.
The oxygen flows through the vessel and takes the body up to temperature And in 30 days, the body completely transforms into soil.
Recompose, another Seattle-based funeral home, integrates families however they choose.
Maybe you want to say prayers, sing a song, anoint your person. That's what this room is for.
And ceremonies can be personalized for all religions and belief systems. At the end of the process, families are given the remaining soil. Cremation, according to Environmental Advocates New York, uses about 28 gallons of fuel and releases 540 pounds of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere per body.
Terramation takes about 90% less energy to complete. And when we're done, we have a material, soil, that can then be used to restart the cycle of life.
But not everyone is on board with this kind of legislation. The Catholic Church, for example, opposes it. The New York State Catholic Conference saying in a statement in part, a process whereby human remains are composted and scattered in a designated scattering garden or area in a cemetery fails to sufficiently respect the dignity due the deceased. Trina said she's found comfort in the terramation process and believes that through this option, her mother's legacy of caring for the environment can live on.
This is Leanne, how she would choose for herself and others, to be mindful of the footprint that she left. And I'm hoping that this will be more widely practiced, that people
Okay, I'm going to stop there. I know
will
we
see
only
that
have a couple minutes.
really beautiful.
And I just, like I said, wanted to introduce you to that. I will say, since that video was recorded some months ago, the state of New York has also made natural organic reduction legal. I don't know that there are facilities operating in New York. I am absolutely sure there are some being built, because I wouldn't believe it if you told me that they made something possible and there weren't some people in New York who were making it happen. There is not currently legislation that I know of in Pennsylvania, but I hope to shortly be organizing them. So, so your thoughts, your questions?
There was a question about ballpark pricing for green versus natural organ reduction. Is there, any type of differences in prices for all of that?
So a typical traditional burial can cost $10,000 or $12,000, and part of the cost is the obviously the grave space and the vault, which your grave spaces for a green burial, depending on where you go, maybe less. I don't believe they are at Gethsemane. I believe the grave spaces are about the same, but you are not purchasing a casket, which, depending on the type of casket you choose, may be significantly less if you're, say, using a shroud rather than a $2,000 casket. You have savings there. The cost of a green burial is not significantly less than a traditional burial, but it can be less. It should be less, but not half. Terramation or natural organic reduction is not available in the state of Pennsylvania right now. The places that I am aware of doing it on the West Coast charge between $5,000 and $7,000 for the natural organic reduction process, but now you'd be adding in the cost of getting someone there, which essentially makes it about the cost of having a green burial here, because shipping someone to the West Coast can be costly, even if they're, just going there for that. So I don't know that there is again, which is why I think cremation becomes the popular greener choice, is because cremations can be had for significantly less than burial. Oh, and there's my poll.
Oh, yeah, sorry, you can see the poll. Yep, there's the poll. It's just a few questions. We just want to see how or if folks will disseminate and so forth. So definitely wanted to put that up as we're winding down the last minute. Any other questions or thoughts at all? I thought I hadn't heard about reef myself. I thought that was quite interesting. Obviously that's not in Pennsylvania that you can be a reef. But But yeah, I don't see any other questions or hand raises. This was very informative. We definitely thank you for being here. I've learned so much more than I knew before, and I hope that things can come to Pennsylvania as far as natural things and preservation land. I thought that was quite interesting, most definitely. Getting a thumbs up there. Whoops, I hope you guys can't see. For some reason, all of a sudden my mailbox came up. So thank you so much for attending this month's Circle of Life Coalition. Next month, we will be talking about home-based palliative medicine and care and how to get that in Pennsylvania, in Reading. We will have somebody from the palliative care program in ProMedica coming to speak with us, and we look forward to that. Certainly answer the poll, go to our website, YouTube channel, and you can find us on Facebook. Our website is www.circleoflifecoalition.org, where you can find a lot of our resources also. And if you want to send us, Laura, a couple of those resources to my email, you have it. We could put that on our resources page for sure, so people can find it. Yeah. All right, everyone. Oh, Darnell, I'm sorry. Oh, no, never mind. But anyway, yes. Thank you, everyone, so much. Appreciate.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you so much. It was very informative. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks.